The Bible tells us in Matthew 14, verses 22 to 27, that after Jesus and his disciples fed more than 5,000 people beside the lake, Jesus made his followers get into the boat. He told them to go ahead of him to the other side of the lake. Jesus stayed there to tell the people they could go home. After he said goodbye to them, he went alone up into the hills to pray. It was late, and Jesus was there alone. By this time, the boat was already far away on the lake. The boat was having trouble because of the waves, and the wind was blowing against it. Between 3 and 6 o'clock in the morning, Jesus' followers were still in the boat. Jesus came to them. He was walking on the water. When the followers saw him walking on the water, they were afraid.
Have courage. It is I. Do not be afraid.
As you can see, our boys and girls have spent the week on the Sea of Galilee. And we're going to join them on the Sea of Galilee this morning. The disciples have just shoved off from the shores of El Batija to return by ship to Capernaum. It's night. Their minds are filled with dark, stormy, unhappy thoughts toward Jesus. They are really ticked off at their master. Why? For refusing to let them exalt him as the King of Israel at the conclusion of the feeding of this huge crowd. You'll want to be in Matthew 14 as we consider this story today. That's where the bulk of the story is, although it's mentioned in other Gospels as well. They had not gone far when suddenly a violent storm hit the Sea of Galilee. The ship was in the midst of the sea, tossed with the waves, Matthew 14:24 tells us. And John includes that the waves were the result of a great wind that blew. They were in the midst of the lake, but distant from land. Now, the midst does not mean exactly the middle of the lake. They were not in the middle of the lake because in those days the ships hugged the land as they crossed the Sea of Galilee for fear of these kinds of windstorms. It was common practice to do that and not get far from the land. But they were in the midst of the lake, in the waters. The storm struck suddenly. It had been a perfect day, a beautiful day, and then zap, presto, change-o. The weather was totally different. And this type of storm was very common and still is very common on the Sea of Galilee today because it lies 680 feet below sea level and is surrounded by mountains more than 1,000 feet above sea level, and the cool air rushes down from these surrounding highlands through the deep ravines to the lake surface. In summer, these winds get up to 40 and 50 miles an hour, and we know a little bit about that kind of wind here, don't we? And what it can do. I've been asked questions many times by people in Lincoln since we've moved back here. Why did you leave Boston? Why did you come to Nebraska? And one of my favorite answers is wind. We love wind. Well, you have to like wind to live here, don't you? That was a tremendous headwind. And the disciples had to fight for survival all night. They were toiling and rowing. They had rowed about 25 or 30 furlongs. A furlong is from the Greek word stadioi, which is 606.5 feet. So that means in our measure that they had rowed about 3.5 miles. It was the fourth watch of the night. Now the Roman system of watches had 4 of them. The evening watch was from 6 to 9, the midnight watch from 9 to 12, the cockcrow from 12 to 3, and the morning watch from 3 to 6. Thus, as you saw on the screen a moment ago, it was around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. They had rowed all night, 8 hours, for they had left at sunset around 7 p.m. And finally, in the fourth watch, they just give up in despair and lay the oars down. They're still not there. There's no land in sight. This, my friends, turned into a very Unround trip. It had been a simple trip going over. It's just a short distance, only a couple of hours. And now they had spent 8 hours and were nowhere near their destination. The raging tempest, the blackness of night, exhaustion from rowing, the uncertainty of their location led them to give themselves up for lost. And at the fourth watch, they just stopped rowing and let the wind and waves drive them up the river. Now let's look at a very different picture. Let's look at what Jesus is doing at this same time. Matthew 14, verse 23 says, while the disciples rowed, Jesus prayed. He went up to a mountain and prayed. While they rowed for 8 hours, he prayed for 8 hours. What did he pray about all that time? He pleaded with God for power to reveal to men the true nature of his mission, to make plain the meaning of the loaves and fishes, particularly his disciples. For their messianic concepts were about to be shattered to smithereens in a most painful, humiliating manner. For they were soon to see Jesus made a king, all right, King of the Jews, but on a cross, not on a throne. And he poured out his supplications to his Father for these men, that their understanding might be opened and their faith fail not during those closing events of his earthly ministry. And he watched the disciples on the sea from the mountaintop. Mark 6:48 says, he saw them toiling in rowing. He saw them 3.5 miles away. He saw them in the blackness of night 3.5 miles away. Talk about bionic eyes. He saw them struggling with the elements. His eyes followed the storm-tossed boat, for it was carrying precious cargo. It was carrying the men who were to be the light of the world. And he watched until he saw them give up and stop rowing. He waited until their hearts were subdued and their unholy ambition quelled, and they, in humility, asked for help. And then he proceeded to help them. Mark 14:25 says, he walks on the water to them in the fourth watch of the night, around 3 or 4 a.m. Here he comes. And the disciples see him coming. At the moment, they believe they are lost at sea. They see a mysterious, gleaming figure walking on the white-capped billows of the foaming sea, and John says, drawing nigh the ship. Mark says they all saw him. And as you saw a moment ago, they reacted with terror. They were troubled. They cried out for fear. They said it's a spirit, a phantasma, or a phantom, a ghost. And they got the impression that it was going to walk right by them. Mark 6:48, he would have passed them by. But they recognize him and cry out again, this time for help, not for fear. And Jesus turns and responds. Peter's almost beside himself with joy. And he acts with characteristic brashness. He says, let me join you on the water. And Jesus said, come. And Peter climbed over the side. And he began to walk on the water. Oh, wow, he thought. This is unbelievable. I can walk on water just like Jesus. And he looked around to see his buddies. Did you see this? And when he turns back, there's this huge wave between him and Jesus. He can no longer see him. He's terrified now. He sees the large wave instead of Jesus. He sees the intense wind, and he begins to sink, and he said, Lord, save me. Our boys and girls are going to sing at the conclusion of our worship today, I will make you fishers of men. Jesus knows how to fish for men, and he had to fish for this guy as he was going down. He immediately saves him. He gives him his hand, he catches him, he lifts him up, and he says, why did you doubt? Did you think I would let you down? Did you think I would let you drown? Matthew 14:31. Then he takes Peter by the hand, and they walk together to the ship and get in the boat together. Believe me, there's no proud look on his face now. He's very humble, shaken, relieved. He's a very grateful man. And the rest of the disciples willingly received him into the ship. When they board the ship, the storm immediately stops. And they were amazed beyond measure. Why were they so surprised at this miraculous display of power over nature? You know the answer? The explanation Jesus gives in Mark 6? For they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. It was through their misconceptions of his mission, through their displeasure and discontent and doubt, generated by his refusal to allow them to make him a king. So the lesson they failed to learn on the shore, he taught them on the sea. I am God's Son. I am the Messiah. I am carrying out his divine mission in his divine power. I can meet every need of man, every physical need, but more importantly, every spiritual need. And no wonder at this point it says the men on board the ship worshiped him. Matthew 14:33. And then the ship lands at Gennesaret, a rectangular plain several miles south of Capernaum. They were now about 7 miles from El Batiha, where the feeding of the 5,000 had taken place, rather than the 3.5 miles they should have traveled. But with relieved and thankful hearts, they rejoiced that their Unround trip was finally over. What can we learn from this for ourselves? Jesus would say to us through this story, I'm ready and waiting to meet your every need. Do you like the sound of that? Amen. Do you need that? He says, I'm ready. I'm waiting. I can meet your every need. I'm concerned with your physical needs. But most of all, I want to supply your spiritual needs. But you must recognize your need and ask me for help. He would also say to us, you can greatly simplify your life by obeying me. If my disciples had embarked from El Batiha when I told them to, they might have missed the storm, or at least had light to deal with it. Jesus would say to us, let not your heart be troubled. Don't allow your minds to become filled with dark, negative, stormy, perplexed thoughts. It may make it necessary for me to allow you to pass through dark, stormy circumstances to help you see your true needs. Jesus would say to us, suspend your wrong thinking and attitudes and unite your energies with your fellows to keep the boat from sinking, just as my disciples forgot their disaffection and unbelief and impatience and began to row together to keep the boat from sinking. And there's a special message for Piedmont right now. Let us all, those very favorable to the remodel project and those not so much, unite together to keep the boat from sinking, for we're all in the boat together, and let's lay aside any wrong thinking and row together. What do you say? Jesus would say to us, in every stormy situation, know that I am there to say, be of good cheer. It is I. Be not afraid. I am carefully watching your every move. I know exactly where you are, no matter how far away you are, or how dark the night, for you are precious cargo to me. He would say to us, don't take your eyes off me. Don't look away in pride. But if you fall, I'll save you when you cry out for help, and I'll walk hand in hand with you to save you. And he would say to us, when you invite me on board, the storm will cease, and you will arrive safely on that other shore. You want to be there? On that other shore? Jesus is the one who can take us safely there through every storm. May God help us to keep our eyes on him. Heavenly Father, fill our hearts with your presence, and with these assurances we pray in Jesus' name.